Her heel slipped off as he backed her against the door. That's what caught my eye first. The heel. Red. Pointed. The kind she'd mock in a catalog. Only women trying too hard wear those, she once scoffed. And there she was, trying. It was 2:04 a.m. I checked twice. My hand shook as I held the phone, zoomed in. I should have gone home. Should have turned the car around when I saw the sedan, when I saw her suitcase still in the back seat, forgotten like it didn't matter anymore. But I didn't. I parked under the flickering light of a half-broken lamp post behind the Baymont Inn and Suites. Not exactly the kind of place a Fortune 500 marketing exec stays during corporate chaperone weekends. No valet. No branded lanyards. Just truckers, day-rate guests, and what I later found out was a 24-hour discount vending machine in the lobby that sold condoms and microwave burritos. I sat there, quiet, still, the kind of stillness that makes your own breathing sound like a betrayal. Then the door opened. Room 112. I remember that because the paint was peeling off the number like it didn't even want to be associated with the room anymore. He stepped out first. Tall, charcoal suit, navy tie loosened like he earned it. His hand pulled her out gently, like they'd done this 1,000 times. No urgency, no fumbling, no guilt. And Kara, my wife of 17 years, the woman who once cried watching Field of Dreams and said, "You remind me of him. The quiet ones always hold everything together," was smiling like a teenager breaking curfew. Her hand slipped around his neck. His found her lower back. And then they kissed. Not passionate, not sloppy. Routine. That's what crushed me the most. It was choreographed, practiced. The kiss of two people who'd built a rhythm behind my back. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I didn't honk the horn or scream her name across the asphalt like some Lifetime movie husband. I just took the photo. One shot. No flash. Framed between the motel door and the Coke machine. She laughed at something he whispered right after, the kind of laugh that wrinkles the nose and closes the eyes. I recognized that laugh. I used to be the cause of it. They didn't see me. She never even glanced my direction. They went back inside and shut the door, and I just sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the image on my phone. The photo wasn't art. It wasn't damning in court. It wasn't graphic. But it was enough. It was her. His hand. Her smile. The red heel. Proof. And that's when it changed. I didn't slam the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I just whispered to myself, like I was narrating a story that hadn't been written yet. She picked the battlefield. I'll pick the war. Then I deleted the photo from the main album, but not from the encrypted folder. That one had a name. Harvest. Because what she planted that night, I was going to reap. Inch by inch. Person by person. And not a single scream of hers was going to be heard. Until it was far, far too late. At first, he was just some guy in a suit. That's how I convinced myself to stay calm. Some faceless fling. Some hotel heat stranger who'd disappear into her rearview mirror by Monday morning. Easier to pretend it didn't mean anything if he didn't mean anything. But insomnia has a way of stripping your defenses. It was around 3:40 a.m. when I finally opened the photo again. Lying in the guest room, one lamp on, one foot still in my shoe, staring at the glow of my phone like it could somehow explain the past 17 years to me. I zoomed in, pixel by pixel. There was something about the jawline. Too sharp. The way he held her. Confident, but familiar. Not the adrenaline rush grip of a one-night stand. No. This was someone who'd earned that familiarity. And then it hit. Like a goddamn anvil to the chest. The cufflinks. I recognized them. Tiny American flag enamel, slightly chipped on the left one. I gave those to him last Memorial Day. At our house. After the barbecue, where he couldn't stop talking about how he'd finally quit smoking. After he joked with me, beer in hand, about how lucky I was to land Kara. "She's way out of your league, man," he laughed. I laughed too, because back then, I thought it was just a compliment. Just a joke. Tom freaking Spencer, Kara's cousin's husband. The one who always volunteered to help me fix stuff around the house. Who'd installed my garage shelving and acted like he didn't expect a thank you. The guy who borrowed my damn drill for 3 months and brought it back with a six-pack and a smirk. I sat up straight. My mouth was dry. I didn't even feel anger yet, just a spreading, dull nausea. Like the betrayal was too wide to fully process. This wasn't a fling. This was a family infection. They were at Thanksgiving together. Christmas brunch. His wife, Michelle, used to babysit our dog when we traveled. And now this smug son of a bitch was sneaking my wife into dingy motel rooms like some back-alley romance novel reject. I got up and went downstairs, poured myself a glass of water, then poured that water down the sink and grabbed a scotch instead. Sat down at my desk, opened my old Canon printer, pulled out a fresh sheet of glossy photo paper I hadn't touched since my niece's graduation, loaded the image, clicked print twice. The first copy slid out slowly. I held it. It smelled like heat and chemicals, like something sterile trying to dress up filth. I put it in a small black envelope and slid it into my drawer. The second copy, I sealed in a thick manila envelope. Nothing written on it. Not yet. But I already knew it wouldn't stay in my house. It would travel. And the moment it arrived, it would speak louder than I ever could. Let them laugh at my silence. Let her call me dull. Let them all think I'm just the guy who oversalts the ribs and mows the lawn too early on Saturdays. They think silence is weakness. I was about to make it my weapon. 2 days later, she walked into the kitchen like nothing was different. As if the air between us wasn't thick enough to choke on. As if I hadn't watched her press her body into Tom like she belonged to him. Like I wasn't quietly watching her now with the kind of patience a snake shows just before it coils. She was scrolling through her phone, barefoot, wearing my old college sweatshirt like she still had a right to it. The same one she used to steal back when we were dating. The one she once said smelled like loyalty. Irony doesn't knock. It just barges in. Tom thinks you're too quiet, she said with a giggle, her eyes glued to whatever nonsense was on the screen. I was by the sink, rinsing out my coffee mug. I didn't look up, didn't react. I just smiled. So does everyone, I said, voice flat as drywall. She looked up then, raised an eyebrow. God, don't take things so seriously. That's why no one invites you anywhere anymore. No one invites you anywhere anymore. She said it with that performative shrug, like she was being cute. Like she thought I'd laugh along and play the dull husband she'd already buried in her head. Instead, I nodded. And as I dried my hands on the dish towel, I opened my phone and marked one event on my calendar. July 8th, Kara's family barbecue. The one she never missed. The one where everyone would be there. Her father Robert, her Aunt Cheryl, her cousins, and yes, Michelle, Tom's wife. I had never cared much for the gathering. Always felt like a stray dog they allowed in the yard out of pity. They talked around me, not to me. Kara always claimed they just weren't intellectual, but that was her code for, they find you boring. But this year, I'd be there. This year, I wouldn't be the one everyone ignored while the grill smoked and the beer flowed. She walked past me, brushing my arm casually, oblivious. She smelled like lilacs and betrayal. Don't forget to pick up more charcoal, she added over her shoulder. We're low. I said nothing. Just watched her walk away. She was still laughing at something on her phone, probably some inside joke with Tom. I could hear her tapping out a reply. I'd bet my right hand it wasn't to Michelle. That's the thing about Kara. She never expected consequences. She built her whole personality around being the fun one, the bold one, the storm. She thought I was just the guy who held the umbrella. But that barbecue? That's where the weather was going to change. I had already picked the bourbon Robert liked. Already started drafting the letter that would go with the photo. I even picked out the envelope, heavy stock, dark green, the kind used for retirement announcements or funeral invitations. Some would say that's poetic. But for me, it was just math. She laughed at me in that kitchen. She won't be laughing in the yard. At 1:17 a.m., she rolled over and mumbled something in her sleep. I froze at my desk, eyes fixed on the financial dashboard glowing from my laptop. She didn't wake, just adjusted the blanket and went back to whatever dream world cheaters escape to when they think they're clever. I clicked withdraw. The first account emptied in seconds. Most people don't realize how little it takes to disappear. Not physically, financially. That's where the real vanishing happens. Bank accounts don't scream. Retirement plans don't accuse. They just respond to key codes and mouse clicks. Silent obedience. I was careful, deliberate. Not a single red flag. Small withdrawals staggered across days. New accounts opened in quiet corners of banks we never used. I chose ones that didn't send paper mail. Ones that wouldn't trigger her monthly bill sort routine. She thought she handled our finances. Thought her organizational genius was the reason we never argued about money. That's the thing with control freaks. They don't notice when the foundation erodes, only when the house finally drops. The trust took the most effort. It was one we discussed years ago, after my brother Daniel passed. She was all about future-proofing back then, estate planning, legacy talk. We'd even mocked how dramatic it all felt for people like us. "We don't even have a dog," she said once. But I kept the paperwork. Quietly. And now, I used it. The trust now bore only my name. Hers, once co-signed and neat pinned beside mine, was gone. The legal erase was clean, ironclad, filed through a firm she'd never heard of, in a city we never visited. Irony, she used to love how good I was at details. I even paid the legal retainer with a prepaid card I picked up under a different name. By 3:12 a.m., everything significant had moved: stocks, bonds, the cabin title, even the deed to the plot in Vermont her parents didn't know we owned. The one we bought thinking we'd build something quiet when we retired. Just the two of us, she used to whisper. Well, now it was just one of us. I stared at the screen one last time. Numbers that used to represent a life we shared now sat under one name. Mine. No rage. No fireworks. Just that tightening in the chest, the kind that happens when something dies and you're the only one who notices. The lies were already here, infecting everything. But the money? That was going to stay clean. Protected. Untouchable. She would wake up in 6 hours, shuffle into the kitchen, sip her French vanilla coffee, and smile at me like I was the same man who grilled burgers for her last weekend. And I would smile back. Because in her world, nothing had changed. In mine, I just amputated the infection quietly, precisely, with surgical grace. She'd think we still owned everything together. And that lie, like all her others, would sit quietly next to her at the breakfast table, sipping from my mug. Robert never liked me. That much was clear from the first handshake. It was firm, dry, and held just a second too long. A silent message. I'm watching you. He was ex-Navy. The kind of man who shaved at 5 a.m. whether he needed to or not. The kind who still ironed his socks. He didn't laugh much, didn't speak unless it was important, and looked at every man under 60 like they'd never learned to shut the hell up and stand at attention. But despite the cold front, there was one thing he couldn't ignore. Order. I never gave him a reason not to trust me. I showed up on time, paid bills early, took care of Kara when she shattered her collarbone during that freak fall at her aunt's deck party. I drove Robert to his VA appointments when his old Impala wouldn't start, even when he insisted he'd just walk. I kept my mouth shut when Kara rolled her eyes at his war stories, when she joked that his medals were just participation trophies for boomers. He never hugged me. But 2 years ago, he handed me a beat-up red folder, his entire pension plan, life insurance, long-term care directives, and said, "You're the only one I trust not to screw this up." That folder sat in our fireproof safe for exactly 784 days. Until I opened it again. It was that memory, that exact image of his calloused hand placing the folder in mine, that came back to me when I stared at the printed photo. The second copy. The one meant to travel. The one not destined for courtrooms, but for kitchen tables. For the kind of reckoning no judge could deliver. Because the man in the photo wasn't just violating me. He was violating the family. Robert's family. Kara's family name, the one she threw around like a badge of honor, was about to eat the consequence of her own entitlement. She forgot the way her father looked at dishonor. She forgot what he did to his brother when he found out he lied about a combat ribbon. She forgot that Robert was the kind of man who didn't raise his voice. He just erased your name. So I started crafting the envelope. I picked heavy linen paper. Embossed. No return address. Just one line, typed in bold. Robert, private. Inside, I didn't just place the photo. That was just the spark. What followed was the letter. Not emotional. Not angry. Just facts. Timeline. Dates. Room number. Receipts. Printouts from Kara's own calendar when she claimed to be leading workshops in Atlanta. And then, at the bottom of the page, just one sentence. Sir, I thought you deserved the truth before your daughter's lies found a way to stain your name too. That was all. Because Robert didn't need theatrics. He needed clarity. And I knew, deep in my bones, that he'd read every word. He'd studied that photo like a target map. And when the final piece clicked in his head, he'd do what military men always do when facing betrayal from the inside. He'd cut it out without flinching. They never liked me. Fine. But they trusted me. And I was about to make them remember why. The week before the barbecue, I became the husband she used to brag about. I brought her yellow tulips, The ones she used to say reminded her of her grandmother's porch. I made her coffee every morning, exactly how she liked it. Oat milk, cinnamon, 2 sugars, stirred counterclockwise like some witch's ritual she swore tasted better. She eyed me like I was glitching. "What's with you?" she asked one Thursday. "Did you read a self-help book or something?" I shrugged and kissed her temple. "Just trying to show you I appreciate you." She blinked, suspicious. But suspicion only sticks if you feed it. So I kept going. I cleaned the garage, polished her car, cooked her favorite risotto. I even texted her midday with a cringy little thinking of you selfie while she was in a strategy meeting downtown. She replied with a thumbs up emoji and said, "Ah, predictable, Ray." That stung. Not because it was new, but because it was intentional. A power jab disguised as a joke. She wanted me to feel small, safe, dull. I leaned into it. I booked her a solo spa day at a place an hour away, complete with hot stone massage, exfoliation wrap, and a facial I pretended to research thoroughly. I even told her, "I figured you could use some time for yourself." She lit up like a kid on Christmas, kissed my cheek like I was her sweet, oblivious golden retriever. She never even asked how much it cost, which was ironic, considering by then she didn't own a cent of what was paying for it. The truth is, I didn't care what she did at the spa. I just needed her out of the house while I got the rest in place. I visited a print shop across town. Cash payment. No questions. Had the photo duplicated again, this time in a glossy 8x10, mounted to a clean white board inside a sealed folder. Professional. Clinical. Like a corporate memo. Because Kara's family didn't respect drama. They respected presentation. Then I called Michelle. Not directly. That would have been reckless. Instead, I created a new email account under the name S.Henderson. Sent a short, cold note from a public library's Wi-Fi, attaching the image with a subject line that read, "Ask him about July 3rd, Baymont Inn, room 112. No signature. No explanation. Just fire and gasoline. I timed the send for 8:30 a.m. on barbecue day, right when Michelle would be helping Robert set up the grill, right when Kara would be pouring sangria and faking laughter, right when the whole family would be gathered in the yard, drinking, mingling, unknowingly orbiting a nuclear core I'd built piece by piece. See, it wasn't about catching her in the act anymore. It was about the performance. The photo wasn't a bullet, it was a broadcast. And I wanted every single person who ever nodded politely at me, called me uptight, mocked me for never opening up, to watch that broadcast in real time. So I played the part. I wore the shirt Kara liked, light blue, rolled sleeves. I shaved close, trimmed my nails, even complimented her on the dress she picked for the barbecue. The one with the slit that made her feel dangerous. "Looking gorgeous," I said with a smile. She winked. Predictable Ray strikes again. And I laughed, because the only thing predictable now was what was going to happen the moment that envelope hit Robert's hand. And the moment Michelle looked up from her phone with her mouth open and her marriage in flames. It slid across the counter like a loaded weapon wrapped in cardstock. "Don't make it weird," Kara said, tapping her manicured nail against the corner of the invite. "Just be social for once." It was their annual family barbecue, an event I usually avoided like jury duty. Her cousins posturing like frat boys with grills, her aunts gossiping through plastic wine glasses, and Robert giving me that ever-present glance like he was still deciding whether I was a man or a filing cabinet with legs. "But this year," I smiled. "I'd love to go," I said. Calm. Measured. Like someone who'd finally accepted his place at the kids' table. Kara blinked. "Seriously?" I nodded. "I'll even bring your dad's favorite bourbon. That Basil Hayden stuff, right? Look at you," she laughed, slipping the card into her purse. "All grown up and charming." Charming. Right. It was a hot Wednesday. She had a wet towel draped around her neck from her afternoon jog, and she leaned in to kiss my cheek, still a little sweaty. "Thanks, babe." I kissed her back, lips brushing the skin that had once made my world feel safe. Now it just felt empty, like kissing a name tag. As she walked off, humming to herself like some 90s sitcom wife, I walked straight to my desk, pulled open the drawer, removed the green linen envelope. It was thick now. Inside was the photo, crisp and damning. The letter, brief and surgical. And added that morning, a small printed timeline cross-referenced with receipts from Kara's credit card and Tom's business account. Kara's family thrived on appearances. But Robert? He thrived on detail. I labeled the envelope in block letters. Robert, private. Nothing fancy. Just bold, clear, unmissable. By Friday, I'd bought the bourbon. The exact label Robert once called too smooth to waste on cheap company. I wrapped it in a clean cloth napkin and placed it in a paper bag. Casual, thoughtful, predictable. Everything about me, by then, was predictable. That's what made it work. I cleaned my car that night, got a haircut, trimmed the hedges. Kara passed by in her robe, sipping chamomile tea, and said, "You're nesting like we're newlyweds again." I smiled and said, "Just want to make a good impression this weekend." She kissed me good night and called over her shoulder, "You're sweet when you're not sulking." I slept like a stone, because the hardest part was already over. The pain, the betrayal, the purging of everything I'd thought was real. Now came the part one was actually good at, execution. This wouldn't be a messy showdown. No screaming, no spilled drinks, no fists, just a gift bag, a bottle of bourbon, and one sealed envelope that would reach Robert's hands at exactly the right moment. I would watch from 5 feet away as the cracks started to form. And for once in that family, the man no one invited to speak would deliver the loudest message in the yard. The sun was high, the smell of overcooked burgers drifting through the air like a cliché. Kara's family yard looked like something from a catalog. Red plastic cups sweating in the heat, folding chairs in loose clusters, a Bluetooth speaker pumping out Kenny Chesney and Fleetwood Mac. Kids ran half feral in the grass. Laughter echoed from every corner. And at the center of it all, Robert at the grill. Like always. Apron on. Spatula in hand. That same old worn veteran's cap, sun-bleached and barely clinging to its threads. A man who stood straight even when no one was watching. Kara was in her element. Laughing too loudly, talking too fast, weaving in and out of conversations like she was running for family office. She had a plastic wine glass in hand and that gleam in her eye she always got around crowds, when she could perform the charmed wife bit and toss casual barbs my way, confident they'd land like harmless jokes. I stood by the cooler, sipping soda. Bourbon bottle wrapped and ready in the gift bag at my feet. Envelope in my pocket, burning like a live fuse. She made her way to Robert, slung an arm around his shoulder, and whispered something. He laughed, genuinely. His weathered hand nudged her playfully. Then Kara, loud enough for half the yard to hear, said, "You know what I told Tom the other day?" I said, Ray's so quiet sometimes I think he forgets he's married. Tom chuckled. Michelle didn't. I caught her blink, just a flicker, and then her smile returned, brittle and thin. Robert shook his head. Quiet men get more done. I stepped forward. "Hey, Robert," I said calmly, offering the gift bag. "Figured you'd want this early. And there's something else inside. Just for you." He reached in, pulled out the bourbon, gave a small grunt of approval. Then he saw the envelope. His fingers paused on the seal. Looked up at me. "It's personal," I said softly. "Figured now's better than later." He opened it right there. No ceremony. Just peeled the flap, tugged the letter out with a callous thumb, and began to read. I watched his face. Line by line, his eyes narrowed. Then he flipped to the photo. The air changed. The music still played. A cousin still laughed somewhere near the deck. A dog barked. But right where we stood, between grill smoke and lemonade pitchers, time dropped a few degrees. Robert didn't say a word, just looked at the image. Then slowly, he raised his eyes to me. I didn't blink. And finally, like watching a train realize it missed the brake signal too late, he turned to his daughter. Kara, still smiling, lifted her wine glass toward him. Until she saw his expression. Her smile faltered. "What?" she asked, cocking her head. "What's that face for?" He held up the photo, not fully, not dramatically. Just enough that she could see the edges. Just enough for the blood to drain from her face in real time. And before she could form the first word, the backyard went quiet. "Dad, I swear, if I ever go missing, check Ray's basement first." The joke landed just as she passed him a cold beer. Robert chuckled, low and gravelly, but didn't respond beyond that. He was too focused on flipping the ribs, nodding at the sizzle like it meant something. Around them, the yard was alive with the usual chaos, plastic chairs sinking into uneven grass, kids arguing over who touched the football last, Kara's Aunt Denise already half-sloshed and singing something that sounded like ABBA in reverse. I stood 10 feet away, watching Kara drape herself in false charm, bending the truth with every tilt of her head. She says you're boring, Robert muttered to me when I walked up. His tone was dry, but not cruel. Just stating a fact, like a man pointing out rain on the windshield. I smiled. She's not wrong, I said, and handed him the envelope. He took it without much curiosity, slid it into his back pocket like it was a thank you card. Private, I reminded him. Best read it now. Something about my voice, or maybe the weight of it, made him pause. He pulled the envelope back out, ran a thick finger under the flap, and unfolded the letter right there by the grill. It was like watching someone open a package that hisses. He didn't react immediately. Just scanned the page with the eyes of a man who'd read battlefield briefings, casualty reports, dishonorable discharges. Then he reached the photo. His face didn't move, but his hand gripped the edge of the grill tighter. Just for a moment. Barely noticeable. The beer in his other hand tilted slightly. Kara was mid-laugh across from him, sipping her wine, glancing over like she expected another dad-daughter chuckle. What's that? She asked, still smiling. More coupons from the VA? He looked up. First at the letter, then the photo again. Then at me. And I met his gaze without flinching. Robert wasn't the type for speeches. He let silence do most of the killing. But this time, that silence felt sharper than bone. Then he looked at Kara, and something shifted in her. I saw it in her shoulders first, just the faintest collapse. Like she knew. Dad, she said, cautiously now. He handed her the photo. Kara took it slowly. Looked down. The color drained from her face so fast it was like someone flipped a switch inside her skull. There was no gasp. No scream. Just one broken sound. You said, she choked. You said you deleted everything. Everyone nearby turned. Conversation stalled. The kids stopped mid-run. Even Aunt Denise shut up. You said your wife never found out, Kara hissed now, I was darting to the far side of the yard. And that's when Michelle walked into view. Tom's wife. Holding her phone. Staring directly at them. She didn't say a word. Just stood there. Kara's hand trembled. She turned to Robert. But Robert didn't flinch. Didn't say a word. And when Tom stepped forward, face pale, mouth opening like he might beg or explain, Kara spun around and shoved the photo into his chest. You promised me. She screamed, loud enough that even the neighbor's dog started barking. You said this would never get out. You said she didn't know. And just like that, the entire barbecue fell into stunned, paralyzed silence. Except me. I leaned down, picked up my soda, and took a calm sip. Showtime was over. Now came the fallout. The scream wasn't immediate. First came the sound of her breath catching, like she'd been sucker punched through the chest. Then her wine glass hit the grass, rolled once, and spilled red into green like a crime scene blooming beneath her feet. Kara stared at the photo, her hands trembling like she could shake the ink off the paper. Her mouth opened and closed twice before the dam inside her finally burst. You promised you deleted everything, she shrieked, voice cracking like a whip across the yard. You said your wife never knew. And just like that, the entire barbecue collapsed into silence. You could hear the clink of a dropped fork 3 picnic tables away. Tom, her cousin's husband, the man I'd once helped move a water heater for, stood frozen by the core whole boards, holding a beer he suddenly forgot how to drink. His face drained so fast I thought he might pass out. The veins in his neck started to rise like they wanted to leave his body entirely. Michelle, his wife, stood a few paces behind him. She was holding her phone, but it hung limp at her side now. Her eyes had gone wide and wet. She didn't move, didn't blink. Everyone had heard Kara. Everyone. Denise dropped her deviled egg mid-bite. Robert's brother, Rick, who had been retelling the same Vietnam story for the 6th time, just sat back slowly in his folding chair, mouth slightly open. Aunt Marie whispered, Jesus Christ, and crossed herself like it might still help. Kara turned toward Tom, storming toward him like a hurricane in heels. She jabbed the photo against his chest. You said this was over. You said no one knew. Tom opened his mouth, but nothing came out except a useless stammer. You told me you burned it all. That it was just for us. Just, her voice cracked mid-sentence, a violent mix of fury and fear and humiliation. You said she never suspected anything. He glanced at Michelle. One glance. That was it. She stepped backward, slow and steady, like someone avoiding a wild animal. Her hand went to her necklace, then dropped. Then she turned, no words, and walked away. Tom tried to move after her. Kara blocked him. Where the hell do you think you're going? You don't get to just walk away. Oh my God, someone muttered behind me. Is this for real? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The envelope had spoken louder than I ever could. Robert, still standing by the grill, folded the letter back into the envelope like it was just another tax form. He didn't look at Kara. He didn't look at Tom. He looked at me. One slow nod. No smile. No frown. Just acknowledgement. Like a soldier recognizing another who followed orders exactly. Kara turned to him next, desperate. Dad, please. He told me it was done. I didn't think. But Robert didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He just said, you humiliated this family. She stood there, stunned, waiting for more. For a soft landing that would never come. But he just turned his back to her and started flipping ribs again, like she no longer existed. And Kara? Kara finally looked at me. Eyes wide. Shaking. Rage. Horror. Desperation. All churning behind the panic. I gave her nothing. Just the same quiet, predictable man she'd married. Except now, I had finally spoken. Without ever saying a word. Robert's tongs clinked once against the grill. That was the only sound for 5 long seconds. Then he turned. Full square. Straight shoulders. That war veteran posture that made even grown men sit up. He looked at Kara, his only daughter, the one he used to brag about to strangers in line at the hardware store, and said one word. Out. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. It was a verdict. Kara froze, lips parted like she didn't understand the language. Her eyes darted to the left, to the right, like she was looking for someone, anyone, to pull her back, to buffer the blow. But the silence around her was heavy and sharp, like broken glass laid end to end. You humiliated this family, Robert said slowly, in our own backyard. Her voice caught in her throat. Dad, he raised one hand, not to silence her, but to end it. That's all it took. Tom didn't move. He stood like a ghost with no idea where to haunt. His shirt was damp with sweat. His wife, now his former wife, if that look meant anything, was already gone. Michelle hadn't said a word, just walked across the lawn, car keys tight in her fist like she needed something to crush. Kara turned to her cousins, but they didn't speak. Randy looked at the ground. Megan held her phone in front of her like a shield. Even Denise, who once called Kara the glue of the family, wouldn't meet her eyes. I said nothing, just bent down, picked up the bourbon I'd brought, still unopened in its neat paper bag, and walked slowly toward the gate. Each step was measured. Soft. My shoes brushed the grass like I was walking out of a church I didn't believe in anymore. Behind me, I heard her call my name. Ray, wait, please. But I didn't pause, didn't turn around. Robert's voice cut through the air again, just loud enough to carry. He gave me the truth. You gave me disgrace. That was the final word. There would be no family meeting. No group text to smooth things over. No holiday photos with awkward smiles. I opened the gate, stepped through, and let it swing shut behind me with a soft metallic click. Sunlight hit my face as I stepped onto the street. Warm, unbothered. The bourbon was heavy in my hand. I thought about opening it later that night. Maybe with a single ice cube. Maybe just neat. Not to celebrate, but to remember the moment silence became a scalpel, and I finally cut her out for good.